That wasn't even the sermon. That was just like, it's just some things that we wanted to address. There was actually a sermon with scripture, and so, which is a good thing. If you've been with us now, we've been in several weeks, the story of Abraham. You know, back when everything was great and there's no problems whatsoever in the world, everything was perfect. And we realized that no. In fact, actually, we're going to get to a story today that is very famous, and actually you may not even know falls into the Abraham narrative. But you're aware of Sodom and Gomorrah. You've heard of, maybe you don't even have to go to church much sometimes to even know that like Sodom and Gomorrah are bad places. You may not know why they're bad. You may not know, there may not be a lot that you know about Sodom and Gomorrah, but maybe even the word Sodom, or it's like Sodom, or that terminology has been used, and you go, this is not a good place to be. And really what we're going to get this morning is a part one of a part two story. So there's going to be two parts, and it's going to be God's judgment, his righteous just judgment on the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. But what's going to be interesting is that it comes right into the middle of this other story, which is about Abraham. And everything, if you've been following our story, everything's been about Abraham. Abraham and the promises. God says, Abraham, I'm going to give you children. I'm going to fill the land. I'm going to give you this land. I'm going to fill the land with all of these kids, or all these descendants. I'm going to make your name great, and I'm going to bless you. And so we get all to these stories, and like, oh, Abraham, and Abraham's faithful. We've been talking a lot about God as the promise maker and the promise keeper. Abraham's job is to live in the shadow of those two truths. And there's times that he does that, times that he doesn't do that. And then you get all of these stories about Abraham, and then all of a sudden we get the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And what's interesting is we're going to get the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and guess what we're going to jump back into? The story of Abraham. And so it's really weird because really a lot of times the Sodom and Gomorrah is taken out of the Abraham narrative as a way of saying this is something totally separate that God was like, we have to talk about what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah, and then back to the story of Abraham. I go, that could be what's happening, or it could be that the story of Sodom and Gomorrah plays a very integral part into the story of Abraham. One of the things that we're going to see, which may or may not be relevant, and by the way, when we were scheduling this out, it was not by design that we would talk about Sodom and Gomorrah right about election time. That was like total happenstance. It was not planned out this way, but yet here we are. And so, but in this, actually, what we'll see is in how does Abraham live in this world? How does he follow faithfully God in a world where Sodom and Gomorrah exist? How does he do that? See, it's interesting because we can get so lost in the story of Abraham that we think everything was great. It's just God and Abraham, and they're trying to struggle through, and they're figuring it out, this whole story about God and Abraham, and this is all that it's about. You forget that this story of faithfulness is coming in the middle of unfaithfulness. I mean, that's the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's like, oh, and by the way, things are not going well nearby. And so this is the question that we're going to answer this morning is how do you live faithfully in an unfaithful world? If you got your Bibles, turn with me, because it's going to start in a weird place to answer that question. It's going to be in Genesis 18. We're going to start in verse 1. And the Lord appeared to him, referring to Abraham, and the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre, as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing in front of him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent to the door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, O Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree, while I bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh yourself, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant. So they said, do as you have said. And Abraham went quickly into the tent to Sarah and said, quick, get 3 seahs of flour, knead it, make cakes. And Abraham ran into the herd and took a calf and tender and good and gave it to a young man who prepared it quickly. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree while they ate. So God appears to Abraham. This is what we call a theophany. God has made an appearance. This is not a dream. This is not a vision, but this is actually, we say, a physical manifestation of God himself. Now, here's what's interesting, is that we know that it's God. Why? Because we're told it's God up front. Guess who doesn't know that it's God up front? Abraham doesn't know that it's God up front. So it's this beautiful thing that what we're being led in on a secret. You know, sometimes somebody will tell a story, and then at the end, they'll be like, and here's information that changes everything that you know about the story. But there's other times when we get that information up front, and it changes the way we even read the story. Now we get the information. This is God, and God has appeared. And I want you to know this, even Genesis 12 through what we're looking at this morning, how often the story starts when God shows up. God shows up and he does something. We think the story starts when we call out to God, but the story doesn't start when we call out to God. The story shows when God shows up, when he starts his work. And so here it says that God showed up. These three strangers, Abraham sees them, and what he wants to do is he wants to feed. He's like, please stop. Like, stop and stay with me. And we say this is what we say here is the definition of hospitality. In Greek, the word for hospitality is philoxenos, and really what it means is it's the word phileo, which is brotherly love. Philadelphia, city of brotherly love. Phileo with xeno, which is stranger, where we get the term xenophobia from. Like you're scared of the stranger. You're xenophobic. Maybe you've heard that term. And so really it takes these two things, and what it is saying is like really hospitality is this brotherly love of the stranger. And it's this beautiful thing, even in a world where now where people, xenophobia is the big buzzword. You go, what do we do with xenophobia? I go, I'll tell you what we do with xenophobia, what the Bible does with xenophobia, which is this idea is that you brotherly love the stranger. That's what hospitality is. And so that's what we see with Abraham that he does. He sees these three strangers. He does not know these strangers. It turns out they know him. He does not know them. And so he says, stay here while I go get you a morsel of food. But then what does he do? Does he go get a morsel of food? No. He goes and basically he gets the equivalent of, make some cakes. This is the equivalent of 22 liters of cake. So you got three. So this is going to be seven liters of cake per person. Some of you like, that seems about the right number of liters for cake. For me, 7 liters of cake. And he doesn't even stop there. This is much more food than they could even ever eat. 7 liters of cake per person. Let's prepare the calf, the milk and the curds that go with it. So this is like, we're going to go get the food. We're going to go get the calf. We're going to go get the side dishes that go with it. This is a feast. What does he say? He goes, I'm going to go get you stay right here while I go get you a morsel of food. What's the next thing that's happening? You go, well, we see a lot of food being prepared. Some of you guys in our community, you may or may not have ever experienced maybe a meal with Jean and Sarah Lee and Catherine, but this is how I feel when I go to the Lee household. Jean's like, let me just go get just a little bit of food. I'm like, oh, okay, sure. And the next thing I know, it's like trays of food are being brought out. And those of you who know Jean and Sarah Lee, this is true. I go, this is the definition of hospitality. We're going to under-promise and over-provide. Under-promise and over-deliver. And so he says, he goes, so just stay right here while I get you a morsel of food. He does not know these people. We're thinking, like, when we meet strangers, we're thinking, what's the minimal amount that I can give, still look generous, and feel like I fulfill my Christian duty, but not do too much, right? And this is not his thought. His thought is like, more. That's not enough. What is that only? Is that 3 liters of cake? No. 3.5 liters of cake? No. Double that. We need 7 liters of cake per person that's out there. And get that cow. Get those milkers. This is a feast. And then what does he do? He stands by and he watches them. he doesn't even eat with them. This is all for them. I'm just going to watch you. When I was in Uganda several years ago, we went to rural Uganda to do some mission work, and we do some teaching out there. And about rural Uganda, I mean that we did classes and did preaching in huts, and it was really what a great experience. And one of the days we did some teaching, and it was lunchtime, and one of the things about rural Uganda, their staple is really lots of rice and beans. Lots of rice and beans. But everywhere we go, we eat rice, beans, and meat. And meat is a delicacy. But we only eat meat. We always eat meat. Why? Because we are guests of honor, and so they would break out the delicacies. But it would give you a bad, actually, idea of what they would eat on a normal day. And so they had prepared us rice and beans and meat on our lunch break. And I'm sitting there, and they serve me my meal, and so I'm eating it. And then one of the members of the church is just kneeling in front of me, watching me eat. I'm like, okay. And so I was like, Paul's making me a little nervous. Like, I was just kind of like, this is, because I was thinking, really, I'm like, that's a little awkward for me. And she just was watching, like me, and basically, Paul's like, well, she's there, like, to anticipate any need that you might have. And so they want to be right on it. And so if there's something, boom, gone. And seriously, she was just paying great attention. I thought, like, I'm super uncomfortable. I am really very uncomfortable with this. And really his message was basically, don't let your uncomfortableness or don't let your desire to be comfortable rob them of their desire to be hospitable. They're here, and it brings them great joy for this. Because I'm like, just gather around a table and eat. And so this is what we see Abraham do. We see him provide this meal that is much larger than he had promised. And all he wants to do is be there while he serves them. And this is a crazy thing. Abraham is literally serving the Lord. And one of the things you're going to see, it's going to feel like this story is disconnected from the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, but they are deeply connected. Notice how Abraham receives the strangers, and then next week, notice how the people of Sodom and Gomorrah receive the strangers. This is the compare and contrast. And so Abraham, he's literally serving, he's serving Yahweh here. Verse 9, and they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" He said, "She's in the tent." The Lord said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of the woman had ceased to be with Sarah. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is there anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied it, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. He said, "No, but you did laugh." But you did. Abraham's first clue that these are not strangers is why? Where's your wife Sarah? Now we know that it's God, so of course God knows Sarah, but think about if you're Abraham. All of a sudden these strangers know your wife's name? I mean, I think like, what if you were at Rayleigh's, and you're just like, you're going through the cereal aisle, you're looking for your favorite cereal, and someone just strikes up a conversation about breakfast cereal. You're thinking, this is a little weird, but we can talk about it. Like, this is my favorite. This was on sale. I think I could do it. And like, you're just having this nice conversation about breakfast cereal. This is the one that wakes me up. Yeah, that's the one that wakes me up. And all the stranger says, yeah. So what wakes up Sarah in the morning? You're like, whoa. Who are you? And I think we should stop this conversation now. Like, this is, it realizes that they were a stranger, right, to Abraham, but Abraham was not a stranger to them. And then it says that God makes the promise more specific this time next year. Remember, we talking about 25 years this promise has been going on, 25 years. And now God says, this time next year when I come by, Abraham, Sarah's going to have a child. It's going to be a boy. And then they all laugh. And I love how it says with Sarah, I love how it talks about it. It's that the way of the woman had ceased to be with Sarah. It's a really fancy way to talk about menopause. It's like, are you going through menopause? No. It's just the way of the woman is leaving me. That's what it is. Like, it sounds so poetic. But it's just, this is post-menopause, right? And it's like, so I'm old. So she says, I'm worn out. I'm old. I'm worn out. My Lord is old. And she laughs. And I think part of this is like, it's a little too late, God. Like, don't you know how this works? And then God basically says, don't you know how I work? And I thought, the promises of God are fulfilled according to his purposes, not necessarily according to our conveniences. And I think what we want is we want the promises of God to be fulfilled according to our conveniences. And God's consistently like, no, I'm sorry, I don't fulfill the promises according to your conveniences. I fulfill my promises according to my purposes. And this is what he's saying. Like, it's super inconvenient now to have a child. I mean, even now that you think about the logistics of it, like, super inconvenient. This would have been a great promise 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. But now this is not, God's like, I fulfill my promises not according, to your conveniences, but according to my purposes. And she laughs. Then look at verse 16. Then the men set out from there, and they looked down towards Sodom. And Abraham went with them to set them on their way. The Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have chosen him that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him. Then the Lord said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me, and if not, I will know. And so there is this departure. And once again, these three strangers, one of which we know is God, they're not, the purpose of this visit was not to stop at Abraham's house. The purpose of this visit was to visit Sodom and Gomorrah to see if the cries against Sodom and Gomorrah were really true. Not because God is lacking information, but it is this sense of like, I'm going to go and see for myself. God's not going to send angels. Now, God already knows, but he's actually going to physically pay a visit to this city to see if those cries are against that are true. And so he says, should I hide my plans? Should I hide my plans from Abraham? And really, because God's plan, as we're going to find out, is to bring a righteous judgment against the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. That's what he's going to do. He's going to bring this righteous judgment. We're going to see this next week. He's going to bring this righteous judgment against the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. And when he asks the other two people that are there, beings that are there, he says, should I bring Abraham into this discussion? Because the cries are very great. Now know this, is that when sins are committed, typically cries are let out. And when sins are committed and cries are cried out, that God hears those cries. And so maybe somebody sinned against you, and you cry out to God, but God, do you hear me? You go, yes. Do you know why? Because when sins are committed and people cry out because those sins are committed, God hears those cries, and those cries move him to action. This is what we see with Sodom and Gomorrah. The cries, I've heard them, that sins are happening, are being carried out. Because of those sins, people are crying out. Sins are being carried out. Cries are being cried out. And so now I'm going to come down to see if that's really true. It's moving him to action. And what he says is, he says, should I bring Abraham in on this? God is getting ready to carry out his righteous judgment against the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. And what he says is, should I let Abraham in on this? Should I tell him? And so he does. But look at the reason why he tells them. He says, I'm going to tell him because Abraham and his family are going to follow the way of the Lord in what? In righteousness and justice. And so the family line of Abraham is going to be at righteousness and justice. Here, God is getting ready to carry out this, what I believe is a righteous justice, like judgment act. And he's saying, should I let Abraham in on this? Much like if you're training somebody for a job that you already do. You say, I'm going to let you in on this. Now, often what you would only see is the final product, and it's awesome and amazing. But there's a lot of decisions that go into that final product. And let me tell you about my decision process. And a good trainee would say, well, why do you do it this way and not that way? Have you ever thought about that? Like, yes, genius, I've thought about that. The reason why we don't do it this way and we do it this way instead is because of this. And what you're doing is as you're training them, you're letting them in on the process about how it ends up over here. And this happens all the time. I mean, when I work with preachers, they go, why would you preach it this way and not this way? I go, well, the reason, you could preach it that way. The reason why I preach it this way and not this way is because these sorts of things. I'm letting them into the decision process. I think that's what God is doing with Abraham. I'm getting ready to carry out a righteous justice act. And I'm now inviting Abraham, who's going to follow, and his family, who's going to follow me in the line of righteous and justice acts. I'm showing him what goes into this. He says, I'm going to go down there. And look at verse 22. So the men turned from there and went towards Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. Then Abraham drew near and said, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away this place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? I mean, far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked? Far be it from you. Shall not the judge, not the judge of all the earth, do what is just? And the Lord said, if I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole city for their sake. I mean, this is a great question. Will the righteous, this is the question being asked, will the righteous be condemned with the unrighteous? I mean, when you read the book of Ecclesiastes, it feels like at times the answer is yes. Do the righteous have the same fate as the unrighteous? And often doesn't it feel like yes? It does. Because the next question is, if the righteous have the same fate as the unrighteous, then what does it matter? Then why do the right thing? And it's a kind of a place where Ecclesiastes kind of dances around this a little bit. But really it's like, if I do the right thing, and have the same fate as those who do the wrong thing, then why even do the right thing? And this is what he's saying. This is an age-old question. Will the righteous be condemned with the unrighteous? Or, God, will you spare the unrighteous for the sake of the righteous? In other words, that the unrighteous are going to benefit from those who are righteous. And I love how Abraham then calls on the character of God. God, may this not be of you. God, may this not be. You know you. God, the judge of all the earth. May it not be so. And so, God, would you, see spitball. I'm spitballing here. God, what if you go down there and you find 50 people that are righteous? You're going to tell me you're going to wipe out that whole city with those 50 righteous people there? And what does God say? No. No, okay, all right. If I find 50 people down there that are righteous, I will spare the city. Okay, good. He goes on. 27. Abraham answered and said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord, I who am but dust and ashes. Suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for the lack of 5? And he said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. Again he spoke and said to him, suppose 40 are found there. He answered, for the sake of the 40, I will not do it. Then he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 are found there. He answered, I will not do it if I find 30 there. He said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there. He answered, for the sake of the 20, I will not destroy it. Then he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak again, but this once. Suppose 10 are found there. And he answered, for the sake of the 10, I will not destroy it. And the Lord went his way when he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. So Abraham, God, would you destroy it? I mean, you found 50 there? Would you destroy it? No, I wouldn't. No, I won't. Okay, not for 50, I won't. Okay, all right. Well, okay. What happens, God, if you're like 43, 44, 45, 40 nope, 40 nope, 40 nope, 40 nope, 40 nope? You're 5 short. Would you still destroy it? No, I guess not. No, I wouldn't destroy it for 45. Okay. Far be it from me to approach the Lord like this, but is there some room? I'm just going to say, is there some room? Because what if 40? I won't destroy it for 40. Okay, good. I'm just thinking here for a second, Lord. I mean, I really even hate to ask because you've been so generous up to this point. What about 30? No, I won't. What does he do? Then 20, and then 10. It's interesting because if you read the story in isolation, what it seems like, it's just out of total isolation, it could just seem like what's happening here is that Abraham is talking God down. Right? In other words, like God is so angry, he wants to destroy Sodom. And here, like Abraham was like, whoa, slow down, God. Like, whoa, let's let cooler heads prevail here for a second, Lord. And let's just think about, just hold on. Let's just think about what you're going to do. So God, you're going to tell me you're going to wipe out the whole city for 50? Okay, no, I won't do it for 50. Okay, God, I mean, just calm down. We're going to walk this thing back a little bit. We're just going to walk it back a little bit. What about 45? Okay, I guess not for 45. All right, let's just see if we can get the Lord to 10. I mean, that's why, it does seem like that, doesn't it? But you go, is that what's happening here? Is that what's happening in this story? Is Abraham, let me ask you this, let me put it another way, is Abraham more gracious and more just than God himself? No. I had a seminary prof once tell me, he goes, never, ever, ever preach the Bible as if you're more gracious and just than God. And so you can say, man, it's tough that it's here, it's tough that this passage is here, but don't apologize for something in the Bible as if you wish it wasn't there because you think it's too harsh. Because then you come off as pretending like as if you are more gracious and just than God himself. And he goes, and never do that. That stuck with me. So is Abraham more gracious and have a greater sense of justice than God himself? No. So I guess so what's going on here? Well, I'll tell you this. God is not surprised about the amount of righteous people that are in Sodom. In other words, he already knows the number of righteous people that are in Sodom. He's not going down there to count. He's not going down there to get a head count. I got to figure it out. I'm like, okay, well, this one, a little shady, but I think we need somebody. We'll count him. Like on a really good day, we wouldn't count him, but because we need some numbers, we'll count him, right? That's not what's happening here. God knows that there's not more than 10 righteous people. I don't know how many righteous people are in Sodom, but I know that it's less than 10, and God knows that it's less than 10. So when Abraham says, God, would you not destroy Sodom for 50? God's like, sure, yeah, for 50 people, I will not destroy Sodom. What about 45? Nope, for 45, I wouldn't destroy it. For 40? Nope. 30? Nope. 20? Nope. 10? Nope. God already knows the number. You think like kind of like sarcastically here, but yeah, Abraham, genius. You don't think I thought about that already? You don't think that I thought I wouldn't destroy it for 50? I already thought that. I wouldn't have destroyed it for 50. In fact, when there was 50 righteous people, I didn't destroy it. I know the number of righteous people here. See, this is not about Abraham talking God out of something, but this is about God letting Abraham into the process of what does it look like to be just and righteous, because he's going to be following in this world. And so the message to Abraham is, yeah, Abraham, we don't destroy whole cities if we can find 10 righteous people. We don't do that. It's not the way of justice. It's not the way of righteousness. And yes, Abraham, God will not condemn the righteous with the unrighteous. And yes, Abraham, the unrighteous will be spared because of the righteous. I mean, this was his question. God, will the righteous have the same fate as the righteous? And then God's like, no, they won't. And actually, what's crazier than that, Abraham, I will spare the unrighteous on behalf of the righteous. It shouldn't surprise you. It shouldn't surprise me. I mean, that's the gospel, isn't it? That we, the unrighteous, spoiler alert, all of us, right? All of us, every single one of us, unrighteous. How have we been spared the condemnation of God? Because the righteous one, Jesus. I mean, that's the story of the gospel. And there wasn't even 10. There wasn't 9. There wasn't 8. There was 1. God spared the world of his condemnation because of the one righteous one. Billions of unrighteous, one righteous. God spares the world because of the one righteous. That's how he does it. And what he's doing in this moment is he's bringing Abraham into this process. God is giving Abraham a lesson on what his justice and righteousness looks like. And I think to myself, why does Abraham care anyway? I mean, we'll find out his nephew's Lot's there. But then why not just pray, God, before you go down, could you get Lot out of there? Or why not actually even pray, God, then just could you get the righteous out first and then destroy all the unrighteous? I mean, like, why does he pray that anyways? And I go, well, it really is a very interesting thing. So what we see here is we see Abraham interceding, as we would say, stepping in on behalf of Sodom. It's a very interesting thing, this story. That's why they're connected. We see Abraham serving the Lord in the first part of this chapter. And in the second part of this chapter, we see him interceding for Sodom. The first part of the story, serving Yahweh. Second part of the story, interceding for Sodom. God, would you spare the righteous? Would you spare the unrighteous? This is the prayer. Would you spare the unrighteous on behalf of the righteous? And so, as we think about our world, And I didn't ask you the question beginning, like, how do we live in a world that's in opposition to God? And I go, well, a lot of things what Abraham does here. He serves Yahweh and intercedes for Sodom. I thought, man, is there a prayer that we could use today? Yeah. That we would serve Yahweh and intercede for Sodom. But I find a lot of times in like our Christian world, that's not our attitude. Is it? Oh, we're praying for Sodom. Oh, we're praying for Sodom. That the judgment would rain down on Sodom and that we would prove to be right. I mean, why doesn't Abraham just go, God's like, I'm going to go destroy Sodom. Like, Abraham, if truth be told, if we were Abraham, God's like, we're going to go destroy Sodom. We're like, God, where's the best place to watch? Where do you think we could see that happen so that we could, and that's question one, Lord. Question two is, will they know that we're right when they see us? You know, that's our question. We're praying for the unrighteous, but it's not the prayer that we see Abraham. God, would you spare them? Please, would you spare them? And would you spare them because of the righteous? What about 50? What about 40? What about 30? What about 20? What about 10? I find often, if I'm just being honest, that Christianity, we're the opposite. We're moving the number up. Why? Because we don't want the unrighteous spared. God's like, there's 50 of y'all there. But God, there's got to be more. Yeah, there's got to be more. Yeah, there's 50 righteous. There's 50 righteous in this room, right? Those that are in Christ. Yeah, but there's got to be more. 100, you know, and spare. Like, actually, what if our prayer, our honest prayer? Even because I even think today, I was even thinking about the election, things of that nature. I thought, like, I think there is this underlying thing that if the other person wins, if those policies go through or don't go through, that I would prove to be right, and this whole thing would fall apart. And I go, may that not be our prayer. May our prayer be that we are faithful to Yahweh and interceding for Sodom. And the interceding for Sodom is, God, would you spare Sodom? In your righteousness and your justice, would you spare Sodom? Why? Because we were spared. That as we serve the righteous one, we intercede for the unrighteous. That's the heart of the gospel. And that's why this story, I think, finds itself in the middle of the Abraham narrative. And so this week, as you read ads, you see ads, you vote, we think about the things that unfold from that, all of the fear, all of the despair, all of the hope that goes into that. May we be the same. May we serve Yahweh and intercede for Sodom.